Hi guys, tonight we're standing very quietly inside a small wooden house in America in the year 1820, just as the first thin light of morning slips through imperfect glass and settles across your face. You're not waking up to an alarm or a phone, or even silence. You wake to the soft scrape of wind against rough boards, the distant cough of someone already stirring, and the faint smell of smoke that never quite leaves the room. This is a country still learning how to be a country, and you are about to live inside one very ordinary day. You probably will not survive this, at least not comfortably. Life here is slower, harder, and far less forgiving than your body is used to. But that is exactly why you are here. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, because the day has already begun whether you are ready or not. You wake because your body decides it is time. There is no choice involved. In 1820, America's sleep bends to daylight, not desire. The sun is not just a symbol of morning, it is the signal that work must begin. Your eyes open slowly, heavy and dry, and for a moment you lie very still listening. Somewhere nearby a rooster makes a half-hearted announcement. Outside a wagon wheel groans in protest. Inside someone shifts on another bed, or maybe the same one. Bed's not private here. You're sharing this space with family boarders or both. That creak beneath you is a wooden frame, simple and undecorated. Your mattress is stuffed with straw corn husks or feathers if you're lucky. It pokes and sags in familiar places. Over you lies a wool blanket, coarse and slightly damp from the night air. Wool smells faintly animal, faintly smoky, and faintly like every night that came before. The room itself is dim even in morning. Windows are small because glass is expensive and fragile. Some families still stretch oiled paper across wooden frames instead. The light that reaches you feels filtered and grey, carrying dust with it. You can see it floating when you sit up, little motes dancing slowly as if they are in no hurry at all. You swing your legs down feet, finding a floor that is cold, uneven and gritty. Dirt works its way inside no matter how often someone sweeps. That is just a fact of life. One mainstream historical fact that surprises many people is that even relatively comfortable American homes in 1820 had dirt floors in at least part of the house. Wood planks were common but never sealed the way you expect today. You stretched joints stiff. Work yesterday did not care how tired you were, and work today will not either. Historians still debate whether people in this era actually slept better without artificial light, or whether exhaustion simply forced deeper rest. Either way, you rarely wake feeling refreshed. You wake feeling ready enough. There is no mirror waiting for you. If you want to see your face, you might lean toward a small piece of polished metal or a darkened window. Your hair is uncooperative, pressed flat on one side, sticking up on the other. You run your fingers through it, dislodging a bit of straw. That happens sometimes. No one comments on it. The air smells alive. Smoke from the hearth clings to your clothes, your hair, your skin. It is not unpleasant exactly, just constant. A quirky little tidbit many people miss is that this smoky smell actually helped to repel insects. The same soot that stains walls also discourages fleas and lice, though not nearly as much as people would like. Someone else is awake now. You hear the soft clatter of iron on iron as a pot is shifted, maybe someone stirring yesterday's coals back to life. Fire never truly goes out here if it can be helped. Starting a new one is too much work. You pull yourself upright, feeling the faint ache in your lower back, and step carefully around a trunk that holds most of what you own. Clothing waits there folded or draped depending on habit. You will put it on soon, but not yet. For a moment you simply sit and breathe. Outside the world is stretching awake. Dogs bark. A horse snorts. Somewhere someone laughs, already sharp and brief, then disappears into the morning. America in 1820 is loud in small ways. There are no engines, no electrical hum, but there is constant human noise. Wood-iron animals and voices all announcing their presence. You are part of that soundscape, whether you like it or not. You think briefly about time. Not the exact time, because clocks are rare and imprecise. You think about how far the sun has climbed, how long until breakfast, how much daylight you have to use. Time here is measured in tasks. When the fire is hot, when the animals are fed, when the light fades enough to make sewing difficult. Another mainstream fact slips quietly into your awareness. In 1820, the majority of Americans live in rural areas. Cities exist, yes, but most people wake up to fields, barns, or small villages. Even if you live near town, the rhythm of agriculture still shapes your day. You stand now pulling on your first layer of clothing, the fabric cool against your skin. The day presses forward gently but firmly. There is no rushing, but there is no stopping either. You are awake. And America in all its rough half-built certainty is awake with you. The morning waits. You shift your weight and feel the bed respond with a soft creak, the sound sinking into the walls like it has done 1,000 mornings before. This space where you slept is not really a bedroom in the way you think of one. It is simply a place where sleeping happens. Privacy is thin here, measured more by habit and courtesy than by walls. You look around more carefully now. The room is small, maybe 12 feet across, though no one here would ever measure it that way. It is big enough. That is the only requirement. The ceiling slopes slightly, beams exposed and darkened by years of smoke. Cobwebs gather in corners where no broom quite reaches. You make a mental note to avoid brushing your hair against them. Again, beds are arranged wherever they fit. One in the corner, another pushed against the wall, maybe a trundle bed slid out at night and shoved back under during the day. Children sleep together, sometimes 3 or 4, to a mattress limbs tangled in ways that would feel impossible if you were not used to it. Adults share beds not just with spouses but with relatives, guests, apprentices and travellers passing through. One mainstream historical fact that often surprises people is that bed sharing was normal and expected across social classes in early America. It was not seen as intimate or strange. It was practical. Bodies share warmth. Houses leak cold. Space is expensive. You reach down and smooth the blanket more out of habit than necessity. The wool scratches your fingers. Somewhere in the fibres, years of use have left it slightly shiny. Blankets like this are valuable. They take time to make, time to clean, time to repair. When they tear, they are mended. When they thin, they are layered. Under the bed, you glimpse a chamber pot tucked discreetly into shadow. You hope you do not need it yet. Nighttime trips outside are cold, dark, and occasionally dangerous. Snakes, uneven ground, and the simple risk of falling all encourage people to stay close to their beds after sunset. The air in the room feels close, warmed by bodies and lingering smoke. You inhale and catch a faint sour note. That comes from breath, from unwashed skin, from damp wool. Cleanliness exists here, but it is relative. Historians still argue whether people in the early 19th century were actually dirtier than modern standards, or whether they simply defined cleanliness differently based on available resources. You sit on the edge of the bed and slide your feet into simple shoes or boots. They are stiff-shaped slowly to your feet over time. Leather creaks softly as you move. You do not wear them indoors out of politeness, but mornings are an exception. The floor is too cold to bother. Someone else clears their throat nearby. There is an unspoken understanding that the day has begun. No one lingers. Lingering suggests laziness, and laziness attracts comment. You rise fully now, standing in the low-ceilinged room, and stretch carefully so you do not brush your head on a beam. A quirky little detail that rarely makes it into textbooks is how common bedbugs were in 1820 America. They lived in wooden frames, seams of mattresses and cracks in walls. People accepted this as an irritation of a life, not a scandal. Some families rubbed their bed frames with herbs or even mercury compounds in an attempt to keep them away, with mixed and often dangerous results. You glance at the window. Frost has traced delicate patterns along the edges of the glass. Someone has hung a cloth over part of it to block drafts. It flutters slightly as air moves through gaps in the frame. Houses breathe here whether you want them to or not. You gather your bedding and fold it roughly. During the day, beds are not for sleeping. They are for sitting, sewing, sorting, and sometimes eating. Space is reused constantly. The idea of a room reserved only for rest feels almost indulgent. As you carry the blanket to a peg or chest, you pass close to another sleeper just waking. There is no embarrassment, only familiarity. You have heard each other snore. You have seen each other sick, exhausted, half-dressed. Personal boundaries are flexible when survival depends on cooperation. You pause listening to the house. The fire crackles now louder than before. Someone hums under their breath an old tune with no known author. Outside, a door opens and shuts. Cold air rushes briefly through the cracks, carrying the sharp smell of earth and animals. You feel awake now, fully present in your body. There is no scrolling, no checking messages, no easing into the day. You step into it all at once. Bedrooms do not soften the transition between sleep and labour. They simply deliver you from one to the other. As you move toward the door, you feel the weight of the day settle gently onto your shoulders. It is familiar. It is expected. You take one last look at the space where you slept, already transformed into something else, and step forward into the shared life of the house. The day does not wait for solitude. You stand near the chest, now the one that holds nearly everything you own, and you lift its lid with a soft wooden scrape. Inside, your clothes smell faintly of soap smoke and thyme. Nothing here is accidental. Every garment exists because someone spent hours making it, mending it, and keeping it alive far past what you would consider reasonable. You reach first for a simple linen shirt. The fabric feels cool and slightly rough against your palms. Linen comes from flax, and flax takes patience. Fields planted months ago, stalks pulled by hand fibres soaked, beaten, spun. A mainstream historical fact worth sitting with is that most Americans in 1820 either made their own clothing or knew exactly who did. There is no fast fashion. There is only slow effort. You pull the shirt over your head, the fabric whispering softly as it settles against your skin. It hangs loose, designed for movement and layering rather than style. Buttons are few and often mismatched, replaced as they break. Some are carved bone, others wood. Metal is expensive. Nothing here is decorative without purpose. Next come trousers or a skirt, depending on who you are and how society expects you to move through the day. Either way, the weight surprises you. Wool is heavy, especially when dampened cotton is still becoming common but not universal. Clothes are built for durability, not comfort. They itch, they chafe. You stop noticing eventually. You step carefully as you dress, balancing slightly because pulling on clothing is a full-body task. There is no elastic, no stretch. Everything ties buttons, hooks or laces. You lean against the bed frame to fasten a stub and close your fingers, already warming with effort. A quirky detail many people overlook is that underwear as you know it barely exists. You wear layers, but they are loose, open and practical. Cleanliness relies more on changing linen shirts frequently than on washing the body itself. Shirts absorb sweat. They protect outer garments from dirt. That is their real job. You reach for stockings, rolling them carefully up your calves and securing them with garters. They sag slightly by afternoon no matter what you do. Shoes come next, stiff leather-shaped slowly by wear. You stomp once, testing the fit. They're still cold. As you move, you're aware of how long this takes. Dressing is not a background activity. It demands attention. Historians still argue whether the slower pace of daily tasks created a calmer mindset, or whether it simply consumed energy that could have been used elsewhere. Standing here tugging fabric into place, you feel both focused and faintly impatient. You tie your hair back with a strip of cloth or ribbon. There is no mirror to confirm success. You trust your hands. Hairstyles are simple because simplicity survives work. Loose hair catches fire. Loose hair tangles in tools. Fashion bows to safety. You smooth your clothes once then again. The fabric already carries creases from yesterday. You will not remove them. Irons exist, but heating one requires time and fire. Pressed clothing is reserved for church visits or moments when appearances truly matter. The smell of lye soap lingers faintly on your cuffs. Soap here is harsh, made from animal fat and wood ash. It cleans, but it also eats at skin and cloth alike. People often complain of cracked hands, especially in winter. Gloves help, but not enough. You glance at others around you as they dress. There is little variation. Clothing signals class and occupation clearly. A well-cut coat means means. Patched elbows mean labour. No one needs to ask what you do. Your clothes answer for you. Another mainstream fact settles quietly into the moment. Bright colours are rare, dyes fade quickly, and many are expensive. Browns, greys, muted blues dominate. When someone wears red or deep green, it stands out. Colour is noticed here. You adjust a shawl vest or jacket, layering against the chill that still clings to the morning. Heat is uneven in the house. Stand too close to the fire and you sweat. Step away and you shiver. Clothing compensates for architecture that has not learned to seal itself yet. A small, almost secret detail is stitched into one of your garments. A patch sewn by someone you know, maybe you, maybe not. It is uneven but strong. Repair is not failure here. It is responsibility. Clothes tell stories in their seams. You feel the weight of your outfit settle onto you, familiar and grounding. This is your armour for the day. It will protect you from cold, from sun, from sparks and scratches. It will not protect you from exhaustion. As you finish dressing, the house grows louder. Voices rise. A pot clatters. Someone calls a name. The day is gathering speed. You roll your shoulders, once testing your range of motion. Everything fits well enough. Before leaving the room, you glance again at the chest. Inside lie extra shirts, a spare pair of stockings, perhaps a coat reserved for Sundays. That is your wardrobe. It is enough. You step forward, fully dressed, now ready to meet the morning air and whatever work waits for you beyond the door. You step into the main room just as the fire finally wakes up flames, licking weakly at first, then gaining confidence as someone feeds it a split log. Morning light mixes with firelight, turning the room a warm, uneven gold. Breakfast is not announced. It simply happens, pulled into motion by hunger and routine. You move automatically, reaching for what needs doing. Maybe you add kindling, maybe you fetch a pot, maybe you slice yesterday's bread with a practiced hand. In 18 to 20, America breakfast is not a performance. It is fuel taken seriously but without ceremony. The smell is simple and grounding. Cornmeal warming in an iron pot. Salt pork sizzling, faintly releasing fat that pops and hisses. Coffee. If you have it, smells thin and sharp, often stretched with roasted grains or chicory. Tea is rarer and more expensive, saved for special moments or illness. One thing we know for certain is that corn dominates the American breakfast table in this period. Cornbread mush hominy or Johnny cake appear again and again because corn grows well, stores well, and feeds many. Wheat exists, but it is not always reliable, especially on the frontier. You take your bowl when it's ready. There is no fixed seating. People eat where they can, standing, sitting, leaning against the table or hearth. Utensils are few. Spoons are shared and wiped on sleeves. Knives serve many purposes and are never far from hand. The food is hot and you eat carefully. Burns are common and accepted. Blistered tongue is irritating, but breakfast does not wait for comfort. You blow lightly across the surface, then take a mouthful. The texture is coarse, grainy filling. It settles into your stomach with a reassuring weight. A small but fascinating detail often missed is how quiet breakfast can be. Not because people are solemn, but because chewing takes focus. Talking with a full mouth is discouraged. Energy is conserved for the hours ahead. Conversation comes later. You notice how little variety there is. This does not bother you. Familiar food is comforting. It removes decision-making from the morning. People here crave reliability more than novelty. Eating something new too often is a risk, especially when food safety is uncertain. There is still disagreement among food historians about how often people in 1820 actually went hungry. Some accounts describe full tables, others mention gnawing scarcity. The truth likely shifts with region, season and weather. A bad harvest can turn breakfast into a memory rather than a meal. You scrape the bowl clean without thinking. Leaving food behind feels wrong. Waste is personal here. Someone planted this, someone ground it, someone cooked it. You respect that effort by finishing. If meat is present, it is valued. Salt pork, bacon or dried beef appears in small portions. Fresh meat is rare outside of hunting seasons. Preservation shapes taste. Salt dominates. Smoke lingers. Sweetness is subtle, usually from molasses or honey if you are lucky. Bread is dense and dark. It requires effort to chew. Your jaw works steadily, muscles already warming. Teeth matter here. Toothaches are feared. A lost tooth changes how you eat, how you work, how you age. You swallow the last bite and feel ready, not energized, but prepared. Breakfast does not excite you. It stabilizes you. That is enough. After eating, cleanup begins immediately. Bowls are rinsed, not washed thoroughly unless grease demands it. Water is precious. You carry it from outside or a well. Every drop is counted. One overlooked truth is that dishwater often gets reused for multiple tasks, growing murkier with each one. You wipe your hands on a cloth that once was white. It is grey now, but clean enough. Clean enough is a phrase that matters here. Perfection is unnecessary. Function is everything. Outside, the sun has climbed higher. Light spills through the doorway sharper, now revealing scratches on the table, worn spots on the floor, soot stains near the ceiling. These marks are not flaws. They are evidence of use. Someone steps out already, boots thudding softly on packed earth. Animals need feeding. Tools need lifting. Fields wait. You linger only long enough to swallow the last warmth from the fire. There is a moment brief and easy to miss when breakfast ends and work begins. No bell rings, no announcement is made. You simply shift from one rhythm to another, carried forward by habit. As you move toward the door, the taste of corn still lingers in your mouth. It will stay with you for hours, a quiet reminder that you started the day fed, which is not something to take lightly. You step outside, stomach-steady hands free, ready to trade warmth for daylight and comfort for necessity. The door closes behind you with a hollow wooden sound, and the morning air meets your face without apology. It's cooler than you expected even after breakfast, and it carries the damp smell of earth and wood smoke. Somewhere nearby, water waits for you. It always does. You take up the bucket, its handle smooth from years of use, and step carefully across packed ground. Fetching water is not a chore you question. It is simply part of being awake. Every household needs it, and every gallon must be earned. The path to the well or stream is familiar under your feet. Mud clings when the ground is soft. Dust rises when it is dry. You walk with a practiced balance, knowing exactly how fast you can go without sloshing water onto your shoes. Spilled water is wasted effort. One thing beyond doubt is that most Americans in 1820 do not have running water inside their homes. Well springs, rivers and rain barrels supply everything from drinking to washing to cooking. Even in towns, pumps are communal and often crowded. You reach the well and peer down into cool darkness. The rope creaks as you lower the bucket, listening for the soft splash that tells you it has reached water. You pull steadily, muscles engaging, breath controlled. This is not heavy work, but it is constant. A lesser-known detail emerges here. People often let water sit before using it, allowing sediment to settle. Clear water looks cleaner even if it is not safer. Germ theory has not arrived yet. Clean is judged by sight, smell and taste. You lift the bucket and feel the cold seep through the wood. Droplets run down your fingers. You adjust your grip and turn back toward the house, careful now. Every step matters more with weight in your hands. Inside, water is used sparingly. A small basin waits near the door. You pour just enough to wet your hands and face. The shock wakes you fully. You rub quickly, no lingering. Soap is optional and often skipped in the morning to save time and skin. Personal washing is brief. You splash, wipe and move on. Full baths are rare and often shared. Many people bathe only a few times a year, usually when the weather warms. Between those moments, linen shirts absorb sweat and get changed more often than bodies get washed. There is still lively debate among historians about how effective these habits were at maintaining health. Some argue frequent linen changes reduce skin infections. Others point out the risks of contaminated water. The truth likely sits somewhere uncomfortable in between. You glance at the basin. The water is already cloudy. It will be reused perhaps to rinse dishes or wipe a surface. Nothing is thrown away without purpose. You dry your hands on a cloth that hangs nearby stiff from previous use. The privy waits outside, set a careful distance from the house. You approach it without ceremony. Inside it is dark, quiet and functional. A wooden seat over a pit. A stack of old paper or corn cobs waits within reach. You do what needs doing and leave without lingering. An odd but well-documented practice is the use of ash or lime sprinkled into privy pits to reduce smell. It helps somewhat. Complete success is rare. People accept this as part of daily life rather than something to be fixed. You return to the house moving past others doing the same routines. No one comments. These actions are universal. Everyone fetches water. Everyone washes briefly. Everyone manages waste with quiet efficiency. You wipe your face once more and feel cleaner or at least refreshed. Cleanliness here is about comfort and readiness, not sterility. You smell like smoke and wool again within minutes. No one minds. The sun has risen higher now. Light pours through open spaces, revealing dust in the air and wear on every surface. You notice these things without judgment. They simply are. Before leaving for work, you refill the bucket and set it where it will be easy to reach later. Afternoon thirst will come and you plan ahead. Planning ahead saves steps. Steps save energy. Energy matters. You take one last look at the basin, the bucket, the door. Water has already shaped your morning. It always will. Every task ahead depends on it, and every task after will bring you back to it again. With hands clean enough and body awake, you turn fully toward the day's labour, knowing that the simple act of staying clean here is work in itself. You step back into the yard or workspace where the day truly begins, and almost immediately you notice the children. They're everywhere, not tucked away or shielded from effort, but woven directly into the movement of the morning. Small boots scuff the dirt. Thin arms carry kindling. Voices call out with questions that sound half playful, half serious. Children here do not ease into responsibility. They enter it early, often as soon as they can walk steadily and follow simple instructions. One well-established reality of life in 1820. America is that childhood as you imagine it barely exists. There is no long pause between dependence and usefulness. You grow into work the same way you grow into speech. A child passes you carrying a bucket that is clearly too heavy. Water sloshes over the rim, soaking their shoes. No one rushes to stop them. Spilling is part of learning. Strength comes with repetition. You watch them adjust their grip and keep going. Older children move with confidence. They know exactly where to stand, what to lift, and when to get out of the way. Chores are assigned not by age alone, but by ability. Feeding chickens, gathering eggs, watching younger siblings, peeling vegetables. These tasks rotate, teaching flexibility as much as skill. There are lessons everywhere, though few are spoken aloud. You learn by watching. You learn by doing it wrong once and then not doing it wrong again. Scolding happens, but instruction is often silent. A look, a gesture, a repositioned hand. An overlooked detail from diaries of the period is how proud children often felt when given real responsibility. Carrying water or tending animals was not framed as punishment. It was proof of belonging. Being useful meant being seen. School exists, but it bends around labour. Attendance is irregular, especially during planting and harvest seasons. Some children attend for a few months a year. Others learn at home if a literate adult has time. Reading is valued, but survival comes first. There is still disagreement among scholars about how widespread formal education truly was in rural America at this time. Records suggest high literacy in some regions and almost none in others. Geography, religion, and wealth all play a role. You watch a group of children pause briefly, laughing over something small and secret. The sound is light and quick, then gone. Play exists here, but it slips into cracks between tasks rather than claiming its own space. A stick becomes a sword only until someone calls their name. One child recites something under their breath while working perhaps a verse or a list of sums. Learning and labour mix freely. Knowledge is practical. You learn numbers to measure grain. You learn letters to read a Bible or a contract. Abstract ideas wait for later if they come at all. You notice how quickly children tire and how quickly they recover. They move constantly, burning energy, then refueling with bread or fruit snatched between tasks. No one tracks calories or naps. Rest happens when the body demands it and work allows it. Clothing on children tells the same story as on adults, just smaller and more patched. Hand-me-downs are the rule. A coat passes from one sibling to the next, growing shorter in the sleeves each year. When it can no longer be worn, it becomes something else. One curious detail appears in many households. Young children are often barefoot much of the year, even in cooler weather. Shoes are expensive and reserved for when they truly matter. Toughened feet are considered a kind of armour. Discipline is firm, sometimes harsh by modern standards. Expectations are clear. Mistakes have consequences. Yet affection exists alongside this strictness. You see it in a hand on a shoulder, a shared smile, a quiet word of praise when a task is done well. You catch yourself thinking how exhausting this would be for a child, and it is. But children here do not compare their lives to another version. This is normal. This is what growing up looks like. Their bodies and minds adapt accordingly. As the morning progresses, children peel off into different directions, following the needs of the household. Some stay close, others head to fields or workshops. The smallest remain under watch, toddling dangerously close to work they do not yet understand. You move among them, carefully aware of your size, your steps. Accidents happen easily when everyone is busy. A dropped tool, a startled animal, a moment of inattention. People here develop an almost constant awareness of their surroundings. One thing frequently noted in personal letters from the era is how quickly children were expected to understand danger. Firewater blades animals. These are not abstract threats. They are daily companions. Survival depends on respect rather than avoidance. By midday, children look different. Faces smudged, hair loosened, energy softened but not gone. They've already lived a full morning while you're still settling into the day. You feel a quiet respect for that. As you turn back toward your own work, their presence lingers. The sound of small feet running. The rhythm of chores being learned, repeated, mastered. Childhood here is brief, but it is not empty. It is full of movement, expectation, and purpose. The day carries on, shaped by hands both large and small, all working toward the same simple goal, getting through it together. By the time the sun has climbed a little higher, you're already thinking about distance. Not in miles exactly, but in effort. Everything you might need today sits somewhere beyond where you're standing now, and reaching it will take time, patience, and a willingness to arrive tired. Travel in 1820. America begins with a pause. You check the sky. You test the ground with your boot. Mud changes plans. Rain redraws maps. Even clear weather demands respect because roads are rarely roads in the modern sense. They are paths worn into earth by repeated use, shaped by hooves, wheels, and feet rather than engineers. You set off on foot or perhaps beside a horse, depending on your means and purpose. Walking is the default. Most people expect to cover only a few miles in a day, and they measure journeys in hours rather than distance. You know how long it takes to reach the mill. You know how long before town comes into view. These estimates live in your body. It is already well understood by people of the time that America is vast beyond easy comprehension. Letters and newspapers talk about land stretching endlessly westward, but your daily world is smaller. It is bounded by how far you can reasonably go and return before dark. The road beneath you is uneven, stones press through the soles of your shoes. Ruts left by wagons fill with water and soften into traps. You walk slightly to one side, choosing the firmer ground out of habit. This movement is unconscious now, like breathing. Along the way you meet others travelling for their own reasons. A farmer heading to market, a woman carrying a basket toward a neighbour's house, children sent on errands that double as lessons in independence. Greetings are brief, but expected. You nod. You exchange a few words about weather or road conditions. Silence afterward feels comfortable. One detail that only becomes obvious once you live it is how exposed travel feels. There are few fences. Fields open directly onto paths. Forests press close. You're always visible and yet strangely alone. Sound carries far. You hear wagons long before you see them. Wheeled travel exists, but it's slow and demanding. Wagons creak and groan under weight. Axles break. Wheels sink. Horses tire. A short journey can turn into an ordeal if something goes wrong. Many people prefer walking when they can, trusting their own legs over unreliable equipment. There is still debate among historians about whether early American roads were improving or deteriorating during this period. Turnpikes and toll roads appear in some regions smoother and better maintained, while elsewhere paths remain stubbornly primitive. Progress arrives unevenly and often stops just as abruptly. As you walk, you notice the smells change. Damp leaves give way to animal musk near farms. Smoke drifts from distant chimneys. Occasionally something unpleasant reaches you first, warning of a dead animal or stagnant water ahead. Your senses stay alert without effort. You adjust your pace when a horse approaches, stepping aside to give room. The rider lifts a hand in thanks. These small courtesies matter. Everyone understands how vulnerable travel makes you. A broken leg, a twisted ankle, or a lost horse can strand someone miles from help. There is a quiet tension in every journey, even short ones. You carry what you need because returning home unexpectedly wastes time. Forgetting something matters more here. You check your pockets by touch, counting familiar shapes. Knife, coin, cloth. One improvisation people rely on, rarely mentioned in grand histories, is the habit of memorizing landmarks rather than directions. A bent tree, a split rock, a fence post with a missing rail. Maps exist, but memory guides most travel. You know where you are because your body recognizes it. You stop briefly to rest, leaning against a fence or tree. There are no benches waiting for you. Rest is improvised. You stretch your calves, roll your shoulders, and listen. Wind moves through branches. Insects hum. Somewhere water runs unseen. As you continue, you think about how rarely people here travel for pleasure alone. Movement has purpose, trade, work, obligation. Curiosity exists, but it is expensive. Each mile costs energy, daylight, and risk. When town finally comes into view, it appears suddenly. A cluster of buildings, a road widening, more sound, more movement. You feel a subtle shift in your posture as you approach. Places shape behaviour. You stand a little straighter. You look around more often. Travel does not end when you arrive. It leaves its mark. Dust on your clothes, ache in your legs, a slight edge of alertness that takes time to fade. You carry the road with you into whatever comes next. And already, somewhere in the back of your mind, you are calculating the return. How long before sunset? How much energy you have left? The road is never just behind you. It is waiting. By the time you leave the road behind and step fully into the fields, the romance fades quickly. Farming is not a backdrop here. It is the centre of gravity. Even if you do not work the land yourself, your life bends around those who do. Food schedules, money and even conversation follow the rhythm of crops. You stand at the edge of a field and take in the work waiting ahead. The soil is dark in some places, pale and stubborn in others. It clings to boots and tools alike. Nothing about it looks eager. You will have to persuade it. Most Americans in 1820 live close enough to farming that its success or failure reaches them directly. Even shopkeepers and craftsmen depend on harvest being good. When crops fail, everyone feels it. When they thrive, relief spreads quietly. You take up a tool heavy and familiar, a hoe, a scythe, a plough handle if you're guiding an animal. The wood is worn smooth where hands have gripped it year after year. You adjust your stance without thinking. Poor posture means pain later. The work begins slowly, then settles into rhythm. Lift, push, pull, step, repeat. Muscles warm. Breath steadies. The sound of metal biting into earth becomes almost hypnotic. Farming teaches patience whether you want to learn it or not. There is a detail you only notice after hours of this. Silence is rare. Birds argue overhead. Insects buzz near your ears. Wind moves through crops in waves. Even alone you're surrounded by sound. It keeps you company. One practical truth people of the time understand deeply is that farming is not just planting and harvesting. It is constant maintenance, weeding, fencing, repairing tools, watching weather. One missed task multiplies later. Animals work alongside you. Oxen move slowly but steadily. Horses require care and rest. You read their moods as carefully as the sky. A tired animal is dangerous. A frightened one even more so. There is still disagreement among agricultural historians about how efficient early 19th century American farms truly were. Some argue yields were surprisingly high due to fertile land. Others point out waste erosion and exhaustion of soil. Standing here you sense both are true depending on where you look. Sweat builds quickly. It darkens fabric. It stings eyes. You wipe your brow with a sleeve and keep going. Water waits at the edge of the field, carried earlier and guarded carefully. You drink in measured mouthfuls. Too much at once slows you down. A strange but real improvisation appears in many farming communities. People talk to their crops, not as superstition exactly, but as habit. Speaking aloud passes time. It sharpens attention. It makes long hours feel shared. You pause briefly to straighten, feeling your back protest. Stretching is instinctive. Pain is managed, not eliminated. You learn which aches can be ignored and which demand rest. That knowledge keeps you working longer than you think you should. Clothing becomes a second skin here. Dust settles into folds. Sun warms fabric until it feels alive. By midday, everything you wear moves with you rather than against you. Discomfort fades into background noise. You notice how the field looks different as the sun moves. Shadows shorten, colours sharpen. What seemed flat in the morning now shows depth. Farming trains the eye to read subtle changes. You learn to see growth before it is obvious. When you finally stop, it is not because the work is done. It is because something else must be done now. Animals need tending. Tools need cleaning. Another task waits. Farming never finishes. It only pauses. You lean on the handle of your tool and look across the land. Rows are straighter than before, weeds fewer. Progress is visible but modest. Farming rewards effort slowly. Satisfaction comes in small increments. As you turn away, muscles humming with fatigue, you carry the quiet truth that this labour feeds more than bodies. It shapes time itself. Every meal, every journey, every plan traces back to fields like this. The work stays with you even when you leave it behind. You leave the fields behind and follow a familiar path toward the cluster of buildings that make up the town. It announces itself before it appears. Voices overlap, metal strikes wood. A dog barks and is answered by another farther down the road. Compared to the quiet persistence of farm labour, this place feels busy, almost restless. The town is small by modern standards, but it feels dense after open land. Buildings sit close together, their walls nearly touching in places. Shops, homes, workshops, and storage sheds blend into one another without clear boundaries. Life overlaps here. Privacy thins even further. As you step onto the packed earth of the main street, you notice how many eyes are already aware of you. Not staring exactly, just noticing. In a small town, presence is information. Someone will remember seeing you today. Someone will mention it later. Daily social rituals begin without invitation. A greeting here, a brief exchange there. You are asked how the crops look, how your family fares, whether you heard about something that happened yesterday or last week. News travels mouth to mouth faster than paper ever could. By 1820, these towns serve as essential connectors between rural households. They're where goods change hands, disputes surface, and relationships quietly shift. Even people who prefer isolation understand the importance of being seen here occasionally. You pass the general store, its door open to let light inside. Barrels and crates line the walls. The smell is a mix of sugar leather metal and something faintly sour from stored goods. The shopkeeper looks up and nods. That nod carries weight. Credit depends on memory and reputation. Inside conversations pause and resume around you. Nothing is private. Even whispered words have a way of travelling. You choose your tone carefully. You do not complain loudly. You do not boast. Moderation keeps life smooth. A detail you only grasp by living it is how performative politeness becomes. You smile even when tired. You listen even when you already know the story. Refusing these small rituals would mark you as difficult or worse, untrustworthy. Children dart between adults sent on errands or simply watching. They absorb everything. Who speaks with authority? Who's avoided? Who owes whom? Town life teaches social lessons without instruction. There is still disagreement among social historians about whether small-town life was comforting or oppressive. Some accounts describe deep belonging and mutual aid. Others reveal constant scrutiny and pressure to conform. Standing here, you feel both at once. You step aside as a wagon rolls through wheels, bumping over ruts. The driver calls out a greeting to several people without stopping. Names are exchanged like currency. Everyone knows everyone or knows of them. Near the centre of town a notice is posted. You pause to read it if you can. If you cannot, someone nearby reads it aloud. Notices announce auctions, meetings, lost animals or new laws. They are brief and authoritative. There is no space for explanation. An odd but telling practice emerges here. People often gather near these notices even after reading them, lingering to discuss implications. The real meaning of news is negotiated in conversation, not text. You stop at a workshop where a craftsperson works with steady focus. The sound of tools rings sharply. You watch for a moment, appreciating the skill. This is entertainment as much as necessity. Watching work teaches as much as doing it. As midday approaches, the town shifts again. Some people disperse back to fields. Others settle into tasks that will carry them through afternoon. A few linger, stretching conversations longer than needed. Time behaves differently here, elastic and social. You feel the subtle pull of expectation. If you stay too long, questions arise. If you leave too quickly, it is noticed. Balance matters. You exchange final words, promise to return something, ask after someone's health. Before leaving, you glance back once. The town continues without pause. Life here is not dramatic, but it is constant. Small interactions layer over time, building something durable and sometimes heavy. As you walk away, the sounds fade gradually. Voices blur into wind, metal into birdsong. You carry with you the knowledge that while fields feed bodies, towns feed relationships. Both demand attention. The path opens again, with it a brief sense of space. But the town remains present in your thoughts, what you said, what you heard, what you might hear next time. Even alone again, you're never entirely separate from the social web you just stepped out of. The closer you move toward the heart of the city, the more your senses have to work at once. Sound arrives first. Wheels rattling over stone, voices layered on top of one another, someone shouting prices, someone else laughing too loudly. It is not chaos exactly, but it never settles. Cities in 1820. America feel compressed as if too much life has been folded into too little space. Buildings rise higher here, stacked close together, their upper floors leaning slightly inward like they are listening. Streets narrow. Light struggles to reach the ground, and when it does, it reveals things you might prefer not to notice. The smell hits next. It is sharp, sour, and thick. Waste animals, cooking food, smoke, sweat all mixed together. You breathe shallowly at first, then stop noticing as much. People who live here learn quickly which scents signal danger and which simply signal density. You step carefully, watching your footing. Streets are uneven and often slick. Rain does not drain well. Refuse collects where it can. Pigs wander freely, rooting through scraps, performing a strange kind of sanitation. You step aside to let one pass, its bristles brushing your boot. Nobody living here finds this arrangement especially odd. Animals belong in cities because they serve a purpose. They eat waste. They provide food later. Separation between human and animal life is far less strict than you expect. You pass a row of houses with shops below and families above. Windows are open despite the noise. Air must move. Inside you glimpse tables, tools, children leaning out to watch the street. Life spills outward here because there is nowhere else for it to go. One reality you quickly absorb is that early American cities are young and unfinished. Infrastructure lags behind population. People arrive faster than systems can be built. Water sources are shared. Waste removal is inconsistent. Fire is a constant fear. You hear it mentioned casually in conversation. A building lost last year. A whole block gone the year before. Fires are common enough to be discussed the way you might discuss storms. Inevitable. Dangerous. Out of anyone's full control. You pause near a street corner where vendors cluster. Someone sells bread. Someone else offers oysters from a barrel, cheap and plentiful. You're surprised by this until you remember how abundant shellfish still are along the coast at this time. They are food for labourers, not a luxury. It takes a moment before you realise how many languages you're hearing. English dominates, but not exclusively. Accents vary. Words from other places slip into sentences. Cities pull people together whether they intend to mix or not. Later observers would argue endlessly about whether cities like this offered opportunity or merely concentrated hardship. Standing here you sense both at once. Work exists. So does illness. Anonymity provides freedom. It also erases safety nets. You pass a well surrounded by people waiting their turn. Buckets knock together. Someone argues briefly, then backs down. Conflict flares and fades quickly here. There is always another witness, always another distraction. Children run past you barefoot despite the filth, navigating obstacles with astonishing ease. They know where not to step. They have learned the street the way others learn fields. You notice how quickly the day feels different here. Time is louder, shorter, demanding attention rather than allowing reflection. You feel yourself speeding up without meaning to. As you move deeper, the air grows warmer, trapped between buildings. Sweat forms quickly. You wipe your neck and keep going. Stopping too long invites notice, and notice invites questions. Eventually you turn down a side street, letting the noise soften. Even here it never fully disappears. Cities hum constantly like something alive and restless beneath your feet. When you finally emerge back toward open space, your ears ring slightly from the change. You breathe deeper again. The city releases you reluctantly, already pulling at the next person stepping in. You carry its weight with you for a while, the smells cling, the sounds echo. Urban life leaves an imprint even if you do not stay long. And as you walk away, you understand why people speak of cities with both excitement and dread. They offer everything at once and they demand something in return. You step away from the crowded streets and into a workshop where the air feels thicker, shaped by effort rather than movement. The door closes behind you, muting the outside world to a dull murmur. Inside, sound becomes precise. Hammer on metal, saw through wood, a steady rhythm that tells you work is happening exactly as it should. Workshops are everywhere in 1820 America. Blacksmiths, coopers, weavers, shoemakers, printers. These spaces produce the objects that make daily life possible. Nothing arrives finished from far away. Nearly everything is made repaired or adjusted by hand within reach of where it will be used. You pause near the entrance, letting your eyes adjust. Light comes from windows placed carefully to catch the sun. No one wastes it. Candles are reserved for later. Every surface shows signs of use. Scratches, burn marks, shavings gathered in corners. The craftsperson barely looks up. Their hands know what to do without supervision. Tools hang where they can be reached without thought. Muscle memory guides each movement. Watching this feels calming, almost meditative. You notice how much of the work depends on sound. The ring of metal tells the smith when it is ready. The scrape of a plane tells the carpenter how the grain runs. Sight helps, but listening matters just as much. It is simply understood that skill takes years to build. Apprentices begin young, often living with their masters. They sweep floors, carry materials, and slowly earn trust with tools. Learning happens by repetition, correction, and long hours. One thing you might not expect is how social these spaces are. People come and go. Questions are asked. News is exchanged. Workshops double as informal meeting points, especially in towns. Work and conversation intertwine. You watch an apprentice hesitate before striking metal, then commit. The blow lands cleanly. A nod of approval follows. Praise is brief but meaningful. Respect is earned through competence. There is an ongoing question among later researchers about how much independence craftspeople truly had. Some thrived, setting their own prices and schedules. Others lived on the edge, dependent on irregular work and credit. From here you can see both possibilities in the same room. The smell inside is distinctive. Hot iron, oiled wood, sweat. It clings to clothing and hair. You carry it with you when you leave, marking you as someone who has been near labour. A detail you only notice by lingering is how often tools are repaired rather than replaced. Handles are rewrapped, blades resharpened. Nothing is disposable. The idea of throwing away something useful feels almost offensive. You step closer to a workbench and trace the edge with your eyes. Every nick tells a story, a mistake, a rush, a moment of distraction. Tools hold memory just like people do. The craftsperson finally looks up, meeting your eyes briefly. There is no interruption in their movement. Eye contact here is acknowledgement, not invitation. You nod and step back, understanding the boundary. As you leave, the outside world feels louder again. The rhythm of the workshop fades behind you, but its steadiness stays with you. Manual skill defines identity here. What you can make matters more than what you say. You carry that awareness forward, knowing that every object you touch today passed through hands like those. Hands shaped by patience, strength, and long practice. You feel it as soon as money enters the conversation. The tone shifts just slightly. Voice is lower, words become careful. In 1820, America money is never just money. It is trust, memory, and reputation all tangled together. You stand near a counter or table where goods are being weighed, measured, or counted. Coins clink softly, a sound that draws attention without meaning to. Not everyone carries cash. In fact, many people rarely do. Barter is common. Credit even more so. You offer something in exchange. A promise to pay later. A sack of grain. A few hours of labour. The person across from you considers it not just the offer itself, but you. Your face. Your past behaviour. Who you know. Whether you pay what you owe. By this point in the young nation's life, there is no single reliable currency that everyone trusts. Coins from different countries circulate side by side. Spanish dollars, British shillings, worn copper pieces that have passed through countless hands. Value is estimated by weight, not just by stamp. You watch someone bite a coin lightly, testing it out of habit. Counterfeits exist. So does uncertainty. Paper money appears in some places, but many people eye it suspiciously. Promises printed on paper feel fragile compared to metal you can hold. It becomes clear very quickly that most transactions rely on memory. Shopkeepers keep ledgers, names and amounts written carefully in ink. You're not anonymous here. Your debts follow you. So do your payments. One thing you pick up without being told is that owing a little is normal. Owing too much is dangerous. Debt ties people together, sometimes kindly, sometimes cruelly. A missed payment might earn patience. Repeated failure earns gossip. There are records and letters that suggest people spent a surprising amount of mental energy tracking who owed what. Not because they were greedy, but because survival depended on balance. Too many unpaid debts could collapse a household. You hear a quiet exchange nearby, someone asking for more time, someone agreeing but with conditions. The words are polite, but the stakes are real. Trust is being measured and adjusted in real time. You notice how often money conversations end with a handshake or a nod rather than a receipt. These gestures carry weight. Breaking them damages more than a single relationship. It ripples outward. An odd practice surfaces if you pay close attention. Some people deliberately settle small debts quickly, even when unnecessary, just to signal reliability. It costs them in the short term, but it builds something less visible and more valuable. Not everyone benefits equally from this system. Newcomers struggle. The poor live constantly on the edge. Without established trust, even small setbacks grow large. Access to credit can mean the difference between stability and collapse. Later, historians would argue about whether this informal economy fostered stronger communities or simply masked inequality. Standing here, you sense how both can be true at once. Mutual reliance offers support, but it also enforces conformity. You hand over what you owe or promise what you cannot yet give. The transaction ends without ceremony. Life moves on immediately. There is no lingering satisfaction in payment, only relief. As you step away, you check your pockets again by habit. Not just for coins, but for certainty. How much do you owe now? Who owes you? When will balances shift again? Money here does not disappear into numbers on a screen. It remains physical and personal. Every exchange leaves a trace in someone's mind. You carry that awareness with you as the day continues. By the time you leave the space, you understand that wealth in 1820, America is measured less by accumulation and more by endurance. Staying solvent, staying trusted, staying connected. And as you walk back into the noise of work and movement, you know that every future interaction will quietly reference what just happened. The ledger is never fully closed. As the day moves past its midpoint, your thoughts turn more often to food again. Not because you are hungry yet, but because hunger is always scheduled somewhere ahead of you. Meals are planned backward from survival. What can be kept? What will spoil? What must be eaten now before it turns against you? You step into a cool storage space, maybe a cellar dug into earth or a shaded corner of the house. The temperature drops immediately. The air smells damp, sharp, and slightly sweet. This place exists for one reason only: to slow time. Shelves hold jars clouded by age, sealed with wax or cloth. Barrels line the walls, their contents labelled in chalk or simply remembered. Potatoes rest in bins. Apples lie packed in straw. Everything is arranged with care because mistakes cost dearly. You have learned without anyone needing to explain it which foods last and which demand attention. Fresh milk must be used quickly or turned into something else. Meat must be salted, smoked, or dried. Vegetables survive only with help. Preservation is not a technique here. It is a mindset. You lift a lid and peer inside a crock. The smell tells you immediately whether it is safe. Your nose has been trained over years. Sour can be good or bad depending on the food. Mold sometimes means scraping and continuing. Sometimes it means throwing everything out. Judgment matters. You notice how much of your mental energy is spent on avoiding waste. A bruised apple becomes pie filling. Stale bread becomes pudding. Fat is saved, rendered, reused. Even bones find purpose. Nothing edible is allowed to disappear without serving you first. There are notes in household journals from this period that show an almost constant low level of anxiety around food. Not panic, but vigilance. The knowledge that one bad season can undo years of careful planning sits quietly behind every decision. You check the salt barrel. Salt is precious. Without it, meat spoils quickly. People measure salt carefully and reuse brine when possible. The taste of heavily salted food becomes normal, even comforting. A detail that feels strange by modern standards is how fermentation blurs the line between preservation and flavour. Pickles, sauerkraut, cider. Foods bubble and change in storage. This transformation is accepted and even welcomed, though no one fully understands why it works. You carry a small portion upstairs, enough for the next meal, but no more. Overeating now creates problems later. Balance matters more than satisfaction. In the kitchen, something simmers slowly. You stir it occasionally, not to hurry it, but to keep it safe. Fire is controlled patiently. Too much heat ruins food. Too little invites spoilage. Cooking becomes an extension of preservation rather than a separate act. You think about how rarely food surprises you here. Recipes exist, but they flex constantly. Ingredients change, quantities shift. Success is measured by whether everyone eats and no one gets sick. There are accounts that suggest some families kept written lists of what remained in storage, checking them obsessively through winter. Others relied entirely on memory. Either way, the awareness never fully leaves you. You carry it like an extra sense. You taste the pot carefully. The flavour is muted but nourishing. Salt, fat, something grown months ago still sustaining you now. You add nothing fancy. Fancy costs too much attention. When the meal is ready, it feels less like an event and more like maintenance. You eat steadily, appreciating fullness rather than excitement. Conversation drifts but never strays far from practical matters. Weather, supplies, plans. Afterward you clean quickly. Leftovers are cooled and stored properly. Warm food spoils faster. You know this without needing proof. Experience teaches better than theory. As you move away from the table, you glance once more toward the storage space. Its quiet presence reassures you. It holds not just food, but time itself stretched carefully so the future remains possible. The day presses on, but you do not fear the next meal, for now you are prepared. As afternoon settles in, the body begins to notice itself more. A dull ache in the joints, a heaviness behind the eyes, small signals that something is not quite right or soon might not be. In 1820, health is something you manage quietly, often at home and usually without certainty. When sickness appears, it rarely arrives dramatically, it seeps in. A cough that lingers, a fever that rises slowly, a pain that does not fade overnight. You take note, but you do not panic. Illness is familiar here. Everyone carries memories of it. You sit or stand near the hearth while someone prepares a remedy. A tea brewed from dried leaves, a poultice made of herbs and fat. These treatments come from tradition, observation, and hope. You trust them because they are all you have. Doctors exist, but they're not always nearby or affordable. Many people see one only when things become serious. Even then, outcomes are uncertain. Medical knowledge is uneven and treatments vary widely depending on training and belief. You have learned which signs demand attention and which can be ignored. A high fever worries you. A sore muscle does not. Experience shapes judgment more than instruction. There is a small cabinet or box where remedies are kept. Bottles with handwritten labels, powders wrapped in paper, a lancet tucked carefully away. You know what each one is for, even if you do not fully understand how it works. Bleeding is common, so is purging. These methods feel extreme, but they are accepted as ways to restore balance. The body is seen as something that can become overloaded and must be relieved. Relief matters more than comfort. You notice how people watch one another closely when someone is ill. Colour in the face, steadiness of movement, appetite. Small changes draw attention. Care is communal even when treatment is private. An unusual practice that surprises many later readers is how often families relied on women as primary medical decision-makers. They gather knowledge through repetition, passing it down quietly. This authority is rarely formal, but it is deeply trusted. You rest when you can, but rest is negotiated with necessity. Chores still need doing. Animals still need care. Illness slows you, but it does not stop the world. You move more carefully, conserving strength. There are moments when fear surfaces. Not loud fear, but a tightening in the chest. You remember others who didn't recover, a neighbour, a child, a parent. Death is close enough to be personal, yet you also remember recoveries, fevers that broke, coughs that faded, bodies that endured more than seemed reasonable. This memory steadies you. You drink water slowly, you eat lightly, you follow advice that has worked before. There is no guarantee, but there is routine, and routine brings comfort. As the afternoon light shifts, you feel either slightly better or no worse. Sometimes that is victory enough. You carry on aware of your limits, adjusting pace and expectation. Health here is not perfection, it is balance. It is getting through the day without tipping too far in either direction. And as evening approaches, you take quiet satisfaction in having managed yourself well enough to continue. As the afternoon stretches on, you become more aware of the work that never announces itself. It does not clang like a hammer or cut into earth with a blade. It moves quietly through rooms and yards, binding the household together without ever fully stopping. Much of this labour falls to women, though no one pauses to label it that way. It is simply assumed. Cooking blends into cleaning. Cleaning blends into mending. Mending blends into caring for children, the sick, the elderly. The day fills itself. You watch hands move constantly. Dough kneaded while a pot is stirred. A baby rocked with one foot while cloth is folded. Tasks overlap because they must. Time is too valuable to give anything your full attention alone. Clothing appears torn and then whole again without ceremony. A needle flashes. Thread pulls tight. A tear that might have ended a garment instead becomes a memory hidden in the seam. This work happens by firelight at night, by window light during the day whenever there is a moment to spare. You notice how much planning lives behind these motions. Meals coordinated with fuel supply. Washing delayed until enough clothes justify heating water. Soap rationed. Candles saved. The mental effort behind the physical effort never truly rests. There are journals and letters from this era that quietly reveal how exhausting this constant responsibility could be. Not dramatic exhaustion, but a steady wearing down. Days blur. Weeks pass measured by what has been used up and what remains. Children move in and out of this orbit, learning by proximity. A girl handed a smaller task. A boy taught to hold something steady. Skills are absorbed long before they are acknowledged. There is little public recognition for this work, but its absence would be immediately felt. A missed meal, a sick child unattended, clothing left unrepaired. The household would unravel quickly without this steady attention. You see moments of creativity emerge despite constraint. A bit of ribbon saved for Sunday. A recipe altered to make something familiar feel new. These small acts matter more than they appear to. Fatigue shows itself in posture. Shoulders slump briefly, hands pause, a deep breath taken before continuing. Rest is not scheduled, it is stolen in seconds when possible. Authority within the household often rests here as well, though quietly. Decisions about food health and daily order carry real power. It is exercised without announcement, reinforced by experience rather than title. As the light outside begins to soften, this work does not slow. Evening brings its own demands. Supper preparation, cleaning again. Children guided towards sleep. The cycle tightens rather than loosens. You feel the weight of this rhythm even if you're not the one carrying it. It shapes the emotional tone of the home. Calm or tension spreads from it outward. By the time dusk approaches, the labour that holds everything together has already been underway for hours. It will continue long after louder work ends. And though it rarely leaves records or monuments, you sense its importance clearly. Without it, nothing else you have seen today would function at all. By late afternoon, you notice how the men around you carry themselves differently. Shoulders squared movements, economical words chosen sparingly. Strength is currency here, but not the loud kind. Endurance matters more. The ability to keep going without complaint earns quiet respect. You see it in how tools are lifted, not hurried but steady. In how injuries are acknowledged with a glance and then ignored. Pain exists, but drawing attention to it feels unnecessary, even risky. Others depend on you. Weakness slows everyone down. Masculinity in this world is built through repetition, doing the same hard thing again and again until it becomes part of you. Ploughing straight lines, carrying loads without shifting grip, standing through long conversations without leaning. These small behaviours signal reliability more than bravado ever could. You hear stories exchanged while working, not emotional confessions, but accounts of storms survived distances, walked jobs finished against odds. These stories are not embellished. Exaggeration invites doubt. Precision earns trust. There is an unspoken expectation that men know their limits but do not advertise them. Asking for help is acceptable when necessary, but asking too soon raises eyebrows. You learn to judge carefully when silence serves you and when cooperation matters more. Physical appearance reflects this ethic. Clothing is worn, not styled. Hands are scarred and calloused. These marks are not hidden. They function as proof. You have worked. You belong here. You notice how boys watch closely, absorbing these cues long before they are named. They adjust their posture, unconsciously imitate tone, test themselves in small ways. Masculinity is taught through observation rather than instruction. At the same time, there is room for gentleness, though it is expressed quietly. A man checks on an animal with surprising care. Another lifts a child with practiced ease. These moments pass without comment. Kindness does not require explanation. Some men drift uneasily at the edges of this ideal. Those who cannot work consistently due to illness or age. Those whose skills lie elsewhere, their place is less certain. Communities make accommodations, but tension lingers. As the sun lowers, fatigue deepens. Muscles stiffen. Breath comes heavier. Still the work continues until light dictates otherwise. Stopping early feels wrong even when no one is watching. You sense how identity here is fragile, constantly reinforced through action. A few bad days can damage reputation. A season of strength can restore it. Nothing is fixed. Everything must be proven again tomorrow. When the final task is finished, there is no celebration. Tools are set down, hands wiped, a nod exchanged. Satisfaction remains internal. As evening approaches, you feel the weight of this expectation settle. To be useful, to endure, to contribute without complaint. It shapes not only how men work, but how they think, how they rest, and how they understand themselves. The day does not end with rest yet, but something shifts. The body knows it has been tested and found sufficient. For now, that is enough. As evening approaches, a different rhythm begins to guide the day. It's not marked by bells or clocks, but by habit and expectation. Faith slips into the routine, quietly shaping choices even when no one speaks its name aloud. You notice how often conversation turns toward moral weight. What should be done? What should not? How people ought to behave when no one is watching. These ideas are not abstract. They guide daily decisions about work, money, family, and reputation. Religion here is less about private belief and more about shared structure. Sunday shapes the week long before it arrives. Chores are planned around it. Travel is delayed. Clothing is set aside. Even those who grumble still adjust their behaviour. You pass a meeting house or church as the light softens. It stands plain and sturdy, designed for use rather than awe. Inside, benches wait. No cushions, no decoration to distract from words and reflection. The building feels like an extension of the community rather than a separate world. Faith influences timekeeping itself. The week revolves around worship. The year bends around religious holidays and seasons. Even people who question doctrine still follow the calendar it creates. You notice how children absorb this without formal instruction. They know when to be quiet, when to listen, when certain games are discouraged. These rules settle into them early, carried forward without debate. Prayer happens often, but not always publicly. A moment before a meal, a pause before sleep, a whispered request during illness. These gestures are woven into life so tightly they almost disappear. There are differences, of course. Some families attend eagerly, others reluctantly. Some interpret scripture strictly, others loosely. These differences create subtle boundaries shaping friendships and trust. You hear someone mention a sermon from weeks ago still remembered and debated. Words spoken once can linger long after, influencing how people see themselves and each other. Later generations would struggle to understand how deeply religion functioned as social glue rather than personal expression. Here, belief is reinforced by repetition, community pressure, and shared consequence. As darkness nears, the presence of faith becomes more felt. Night brings vulnerability. Fires must be banked carefully. Doors secured. Uncertainty grows in shadow. Prayer offers structure when control fades. You feel it in the quiet moments, a sense that life is ordered even if harsh, that suffering has meaning or at least explanation. This belief steadies people who face loss often and recovery unpredictably. As lamps are lit and voices soften, faith does not announce itself. It simply remains, in habits, in language, in expectations carried forward into another day. You do not need to believe every word to feel its influence. It shapes the world around you regardless. And as the evening deepens, you move within that structure without resistance, guided by patterns older than anyone present. As the light fades and work finally loosens its grip, you feel the atmosphere change almost immediately. The body is tired, yes, but the mind lifts slightly. This is the narrow window when people allow themselves to pause without guilt. Entertainment, if you can call it that, slips into the cracks left behind by labour. There is no switch to flip, no device to activate. Amusement begins with presence. Someone clears their throat and starts a tune. Another taps a foot, finding rhythm on the floor. Music here is handmade and imperfect, shaped by memory rather than sheet paper. A fiddle appears, its wood polished smooth by years of use. The sound fills the room unevenly, sometimes sharp, sometimes warm. You listen closely, not because the music demands attention, but because it rewards it. Each note carries the weight of repetition and familiarity. Storytelling follows naturally. Someone recalls an event from years ago, a journey that went wrong, a neighbour who behaved foolishly, a narrow escape from disaster. These stories are not told for novelty. They are retold because they bind people together. Shared memory becomes shared identity. You notice how often humour leans dry and understated. Laughter comes in short bursts, quickly stifled. Jokes rely on timing and understatement rather than punchlines. Wit here is quiet and it travels slowly. Games emerge with whatever is available. Cards worn thin, simple board games, guessing games that require nothing at all. Children join in until sleep overtakes them, nodding off mid-laugh and being gently guided away. A detail you only recognise by living it is how darkness shapes leisure. Without strong artificial light activities, stay close. Reading happens by candle or lamp, but eyes tire quickly. Most entertainment relies on sound rather than sight. You sit near the fire, feeling its warmth. These muscles worked hard all day. Shadows flicker on the walls, stretching and shrinking with each movement. The room feels smaller now, more intimate. Conversation slows as the evening deepens. Topics turn reflective. People speak of plans, worries, small hopes. Nothing grand, just enough to feel heard. There are no performers here, no audience. Everyone participates, even if only by listening. Silence is acceptable too. Sitting together without speaking carries its own comfort. You sense how these moments matter more than they appear. They're not distractions from work, but recovery from it. Without them, the days would blur into something unbearable. As the fire settles into embers, voices lower further. One by one, people drift toward rest. The night claims its space gently, and entertainment dissolves back into quiet. You remain still for a moment longer, letting the calm sink in. This too is part of survival, not just enduring the day, but finding small ways to soften it before sleep takes over. By now the world feels smaller, not physically, but in how information moves. You realize that most of what you know today did not come from paper. It came from people, from overheard conversations, half-remembered remarks, and stories repeated, until they settle into something like truth. News reaches you slowly and unevenly. A traveller brings word from another town. A letter arrives weeks late, its contents already partly outdated. Sometimes news arrives distorted, shaped by the person carrying it. Sometimes it never arrives at all. You listen carefully when someone mentions events beyond your immediate reach, a change in prices, trouble on a distant road, a decision made somewhere far away that might affect you eventually. These fragments matter because they help you adjust expectations. Printed newspapers exist, but they are not constant companions. One might pass through many hands before falling apart. You read it aloud if others cannot. Articles blur together. Dates feel abstract. What matters most is how the news fits into your own life. You notice how quickly information turns into interpretation. A simple fact grows opinions almost immediately. People compare it to what they already believe. Agreement and doubt form side by side. Conversation becomes the filter through which everything passes. Gossip fills the gaps, not always malicious, though it can be. Sometimes it's simply curiosity without context. Who is struggling? Who might leave? Who's been seen speaking with whom? These details travel faster than official announcements. You learn to read tone as much as content. Hesitations suggest uncertainty. Confidence suggests either knowledge or performance. You decide what to trust based on who is speaking rather than what is said. Children absorb this too, listening quietly from corners. They learn which voices carry weight and which fade quickly. Social awareness develops early here, shaped by necessity rather than instruction. As evening deepens, conversation turns reflective. People discuss what they heard earlier, comparing versions, filling in gaps. No one expects complete accuracy. They expect usefulness. You feel the slow pace of information as a kind of calm. Nothing demands immediate reaction. You have time to think, to watch patterns unfold. Urgency exists, but it is localized. At the same time, you sense the risk. Rumors can harden into belief before correction arrives. Reputation can change overnight. Without records that move quickly, memory becomes powerful and unreliable. You sit quietly, listening, letting voices overlap. Each one adds a thread to the shared understanding of the world. None of them stands alone. As the night grows quieter, conversation thins. Words are saved for tomorrow. What remains is the sense of being partially informed, partially guessing, and somehow comfortable with that balance. You realize that certainty is rare here, but adaptation is constant. You do not need to know everything. You need to know enough to move forward. And so you carry what you heard with you into rest, aware that by morning some of it will already have changed. As the day winds deeper into evening, there is a presence you have been moving around all day without always naming it. It sits beneath routines, beneath comfort, beneath ordinary convenience. Slavery is not a separate subject here. It is part of the background of daily life, visible in some places and deliberately unseen in others. You notice it in the labour that seems to happen without pause. Fields worked longer than daylight should allow, meals prepared with an efficiency that suggests no choice in the matter. Someone rising before anyone else, and resting after everyone has stopped. These patterns repeat often enough that they begin to feel intentional. In some households, enslaved people live close by, sleeping in separate spaces but within earshot. In others, they're hired out, sent to work elsewhere, while their labour benefits someone far removed from the work itself. Distance does not lessen the connection, it only softens responsibility. You sense how carefully language is used around this. Certain words are avoided, certain realities are passed over in silence. Children learn early which questions do not receive answers. This quiet instruction is as powerful as any lesson spoken aloud. What becomes clear simply by watching how things function is that much of the comfort you have seen today rests on forced labour. Clean clothes, full tables, time for rest. These things are easier when someone else is denied them. You notice how enslaved people move through spaces differently. Eyes lowered or alert depending on who is nearby. Movements efficient, economical. There is little room for hesitation. Everything about posture signals awareness, and yet humanity pushes through in small ways. A shared look, a brief smile exchanged out of sight, a song hummed softly while working. These moments are not allowed to grow large, but they exist anyway. You hear contradictory opinions spoken in low tones. Some defend the system as necessary. Others express discomfort without knowing what to do with it. These conversations rarely resolve. They trail off unfinished, as if resolution itself feels dangerous. There are places where slavery feels distant, discussed abstractly, and places where it is immediate and undeniable. The difference depends on geography, wealth, and willingness to look directly at what makes daily life possible. As evening comes on, you notice who eats last, who finishes work after dark, who remains standing when others sit. These details settle into your awareness quietly, but they do not leave. You feel the weight of it in the air, heavy and unresolved. The day has carried on as if this arrangement is normal, because for many it is. That normality is what makes it so powerful. When night finally approaches you, understand that slavery here is not just an institution. It is a daily condition shaping time, labour and silence. It moves with the household. It shapes the nation. And as you prepare to rest, that awareness lingers uncomfortable and impossible to ignore, woven tightly into the fabric of ordinary American life. As your awareness widens, you begin to notice lives lived in careful balance. Free black communities exist in 1820 America, but freedom here is never simple or secure. It feels conditional, something that must be proven again and again through behaviour documents and restraint. You see it in how people carry themselves. Upright, deliberate, watchful. A wrong word spoken in the wrong place can unravel years of careful work. Safety depends on reputation and constant awareness of who is listening. Free black families build lives where they can, often on the edges of towns or in tightly knit neighbourhoods. Houses stand close together not just for economy, but for protection. Community offers strength that the wider society often withholds. Work opportunities are limited and carefully chosen. Skilled trades offer some stability, but access is uneven. Labour is accepted more readily than authority. Independence exists, but it is fragile and easily challenged. You notice the importance of papers. Proof of freedom is carried, shown, guarded. A missing document can invite disaster. The anxiety never fully lifts, even in familiar places. Education matters deeply here. Reading and writing open doors, even if only slightly. Churches and mutual aid societies become centres of learning support and quiet resistance. These spaces feel alive with purpose. There is pride here, though it is rarely displayed openly. Achievements are shared within the community. Success is celebrated, carefully mindful of envy and scrutiny from outside. At the same time, danger's never far. Laws change. Enforcement varies. What is tolerated one year may be punished the next. Stability depends on forces beyond individual control. You hear stories of people who moved often staying ahead of shifting threats. Others stay rooted, believing visibility and contribution will protect them. Both choices carry risk. As evening deepens, you sense the tension between hope and caution. Dreams are held close, plans are shared selectively, trust is built slowly. You realize that freedom here is not absence of chains, it is constant negotiation. Every step taken is measured, every word weighed, and yet life continues. Families gather, meals are shared, songs are sung softly. Children are taught to navigate the world with awareness and dignity. You carry this understanding with you as the night settles. Freedom exists here, real and meaningful, but never unguarded. As the evening deepens, you become aware of another presence that threads quietly through daily life, often at the edges of conversation and action. You do not see it clearly at first. You sense it in pauses, in careful glances toward the horizon, in the way certain places are spoken about with caution. Native people are not distant figures here. They are nearby, encountered through trade travel memory and tension. Sometimes you meet them directly. Sometimes you encounter only the traces they leave behind. A path worn differently. A stand of trees left untouched. A story told with uncertainty. You notice how names linger. Rivers, valleys, hills carry words that do not belong to English. People use them without always knowing their meaning. These names feel older than the houses around them, rooted more deeply in the land. Trade creates moments of contact, skins exchanged, tools compared, information passed quietly. These exchanges are practical and wary, shaped by long experience. Trust exists, but it is narrow and conditional. At the same time, unease runs beneath these interactions. You hear people speak of land as if it is empty while standing on ground shaped by generations of use. Fences appear where paths once crossed freely. Fields expand into spaces that once held other rhythms. You sense how displacement unfolds not as a single event but as a series of small pressures. Agreements made far away, boundaries redrawn, promises that shift meaning over time. The result is felt here in subtle ways: fewer visits, shorter stays, longer silences. You notice how children are warned, not with detail, but with tone. Certain areas are avoided, certain encounters are framed as risky without explanation. Fear passes down, quietly reinforced by rumour and repetition. At the edges of towns you sometimes glimpse movement, a group passing through, a camp briefly assembled and then gone. Evidence remains in the form of ash footprints or a cleared space that feels temporary and intentional. There is complexity here that resists simple explanation. Some relationships feel cooperative, others feel strained. Both exist at once, overlapping and unresolved. You feel it most strongly in how people choose their words, careful not to say too much. As night approaches, these tensions fade slightly from focus, replaced by immediate concerns: firelight, supper, rest. But the land remembers even when people try not to. You carry this awareness quietly, understanding that everyday life here unfolds on ground layered with stories, presence, and loss. Not all of it is spoken. Much of it is simply lived around. When darkness settles fully, the world feels smaller again. But beneath your feet, the land holds more history than any single day can reveal. Night has fully arrived now, and with it comes the quiet authority of order. Law here is not something distant or abstract. It lives close to the ground, shaped by faces you recognize and judgments you remember. Justice is personal, uneven, and impossible to ignore. You become aware of it when voices lower and stories sharpen. Someone mentions a dispute from earlier in the day, a boundary crossed, a debt ignored, a temper lost. These moments do not vanish overnight. They are carried forward, discussed, weighed. There is no large force standing apart from the community to enforce rules. Instead, responsibility spreads outward. Neighbours watch, elders speak, Reputations grow or shrink based on behavior repeated over time. Being known works both as protection and pressure. When trouble becomes serious, it gathers people quickly. A constable, perhaps elected or appointed, steps in. He is not distant from those involved. He farms or trades like everyone else. His authority depends less on uniform and more on whether others agree to back him. Punishment often aims to restore balance rather than remove someone entirely. Fines are common. Public apologies matter. Being shamed in front of those you depend on can sting longer than any formal sentence. You notice how much weight is placed on testimony. Who speaks for you matters. Who stays silent matters too. Memory serves as record, and it is never perfectly fair. Those with strong connections are heard more clearly. Some offences are settled quietly before they reach any official notice. Families intervene, friends negotiate. Compromise is valued because it prevents escalation. Harmony, even if imperfect, is easier than conflict that spreads. You hear stories of harsher outcomes as well. People driven away, property seized, violence answered with violence. These stories linger longer, told carefully as warnings rather than lessons. The absence of a clear boundary between personal grievance and public offence creates tension. You're always aware that your actions ripple outward. Privacy exists, but it is fragile. As lamps dim and conversations soften, the presence of law remains. It does not sleep. It waits in memory and expectation, ready to reappear with the next disagreement. You feel a cautious comfort in this system even as you sense its flaws. Order exists because people agree to maintain it, not because it is guaranteed. Tomorrow the same faces will meet again. That knowledge shapes behavior more than any written rule. You settle into the quiet, aware that justice here is not blind. It looks directly at you, measuring not just what you did, but who you are believed to be, and as the night deepens, that awareness follows you toward rest, steady and inescapable, part of the fabric of everyday life. As the night settles into its deeper hours, your thoughts drift toward the quieter bonds that shape daily life. Love here does not announce itself loudly. It grows in practical soil fed by shared effort, patience, and the steady accumulation of trust. You notice how couples move together through space, not always side by side, but in awareness of one another. A glance across a room, a hand passing an object without asking. Coordination built over years of repetition rather than romance alone. Courtship, when it happens, unfolds under watchful eyes. Privacy is scarce, so affection finds subtle forms. A walk taken slightly slower than necessary. A conversation extended just long enough to feel meaningful. Letters written carefully, aware they may be read by others before reaching their intended hands. Marriage is not entered lightly. It binds households as much as hearts. You hear people discuss matches in terms of land skills, temperament, and family history. Love matters, but so does survival. Choosing poorly affects more than two people. You see how expectations settle quickly after marriage. Work divides along familiar lines. Responsibilities deepen. The idea of endless passion feels distant compared to the immediate demands of running a household. Yet affection persists in quieter ways. Arguments happen, of course. Fatigue sharpens words. Scarcity tests patience. But separation is rare and difficult. There are few places to go and fewer ways to support oneself alone. Couples learn to negotiate, endure, and adapt. You notice gestures that carry more weight than spoken vows. A partner rising early to take on an extra chore. A meal saved for someone returning late. These acts speak clearly in a world where time and energy are limited. Children change everything. They anchor relationships further for better and worse. Joy mixes with worry. Responsibility deepens. Bonds tighten under pressure or strain apart if that pressure becomes too great. You hear stories whispered rather than told openly. Marriages formed without affection. Loves abandoned for practicality. Quiet regrets carried for decades. These stories exist alongside ones of genuine companionship and mutual respect. As the evening continues, you sense how love here is shaped by endurance. Staying matters. Showing up day after day matters. Grand declarations fade quickly in the face of daily necessity. There is tenderness, but it is understated. A shared laugh at the end of a long day. A familiar presence beside you as sleep approaches. Comfort replaces excitement, and that comfort feels earned. You feel how these relationships anchor people against uncertainty. When crops fail or illness strikes, partnership becomes protection. Facing hardship together feels less frightening than facing it alone. As lamps are extinguished one by one, couples retreat into shared spaces. Beds are shared not just for closeness, but for warmth and efficiency. Bodies adjust to one another, instinctively familiar and reassuring. You lie down, aware of another presence near you, breathing steady, real, and immediate. Love here is not idealized. It is lived. It exists in compromise, persistence, and the quiet decision to remain. And as sleep approaches, you understand that in this world, romance is less about being swept away and more about being held steady. As the night deepens, your thoughts turn toward a reality that touches nearly every household sooner or later. Pregnancy is not a private chapter here. It is shared, watched, anticipated, and quietly feared. Bodies change in visible ways, and those changes ripple outward, affecting work planning and emotion. You notice how pregnancy alters the rhythm of the home. Movements slow. Tasks are redistributed without formal discussion. Someone lifts heavier loads. Someone else walks more carefully. There is no announcement of vulnerability, only adjustment. Expectant mothers continue working for as long as they are able. Rest is encouraged in theory, but necessity often overrides caution. You see women bending, carrying, cooking, mending long after their bodies would prefer stillness. Strength is admired, but so is endurance. Birth is expected to happen at home. There are no specialized rooms or equipment. The bed is prepared with extra linens. Water is heated and kept ready. Neighbors are alerted quietly so help can arrive when needed. You sense the seriousness settle over the household as the time approaches. Voices lower. Movements become purposeful. Children are guided out of the way. Familiar women arrive, carrying knowledge gained through repetition rather than formal training. Pain is not softened here. It is faced. Breathing becomes deliberate. Hands grip tightly. Words of encouragement are offered steadily, sometimes whispered, sometimes firm. The room fills with effort, concentration, and tension. You notice how time stretches during labor. Minutes feel long, hours blur together. No one knows exactly how long it will take, and no one pretends otherwise. Waiting becomes its own kind of work. There is fear present, but it is contained. Everyone knows stories that ended badly. They do not speak them aloud now. Hope and caution coexist, balanced carefully to avoid panic. When the moment finally arrives, it is sudden and overwhelming. A cry fills the room, sharp and unmistakable. Relief spreads instantly, almost visibly. Shoulders drop. Breath releases. Tears appear without warning. But even then, certainty does not arrive. Attention remains focused. Mother and child are watched closely. Bleeding is monitored. Breathing counted. The danger does not vanish simply because the birth is over. You notice how fragile recovery feels. The mother rests, but rest is partial. The child feeds. The body adjusts. Sleep comes in fragments. The household moves quietly around this new center, careful not to disturb too much. There are rituals that follow: washing, swaddling, naming. These acts feel grounding, anchoring the event into something manageable. Life resumes slowly, cautiously. You're aware of how common this experience is and how unpredictable its outcome can be. Some women carry many children. Some lose them. Some do not survive the process themselves. These realities are accepted without resignation, but not without weight. Care continues long after the birth. Neighbors bring food. Chores are covered. Support appears in practical forms rather than words. The community absorbs the impact together. You notice how quickly infants become part of daily life. They are carried, fed, soothed while work continues. There is no long pause. Life rearranges itself rather than stopping. As the night grows quiet again, the household settles into a new configuration. Breathing patterns change, sounds adjust. Another presence joins the rhythm of sleep and wakefulness. You lie back aware of how close life and risk move together here. Birth is not celebrated lightly. It is respected, endured, and folded carefully into the ongoing work of survival. And as rest finally takes hold, you understand that bringing life into this world requires not just hope, but courage, patience, and a community ready to hold the consequences together. The house grows quieter now, but it is not peaceful in the way you might expect. Silence here is familiar, shaped by absence as much as rest. Death is not a stranger in 1820 America. It moves through households often enough that people learn how to make space for it without letting it consume everything. You notice how matter-of-fact the signs are. Black cloth draped quietly. Voices softened rather than silenced. Work adjusted, not stopped. Loss is acknowledged, but life insists on continuing alongside it. When someone dies, it usually happens at home. Beds that held sleep and sickness now hold stillness. Windows are opened slightly. Mirrors are sometimes covered. These small actions feel ritualistic even when no one explains them. The body is washed and prepared by family or neighbours. Hands move gently, respectfully. This work is done with care but without spectacle. Touch remains important even after life is gone. You sense how grief expresses itself differently here. There is crying, yes, but also long stretches of quiet. People sit together without speaking. Shared presence matters more than words. Sorrow is heavy, but it is carried collectively. Children are not always shielded from this. They see death up close. They ask questions that adults answer honestly or deflect gently, depending on what they can bear. Fear and familiarity grow side by side. Burial follows quickly. There's little time for delay. The ground is prepared. A simple coffin is built if one does not already exist. The ceremony is brief, focused, practical. You notice how often graves are close to home. Churchyards, family plots. The dead remain part of the landscape. People walk past them regularly, acknowledging their presence without ceremony. Mourning lasts longer than the funeral. Clothing darkens. Social activities pause. Remarriage may come sooner than expected, driven by necessity rather than forgetting. Survival shapes grief as much as love does. You hear stories of losses stacked close together. A child followed by a parent, an illness that moved through a household. These memories are carried, carefully referenced, quietly, rarely dramatized. As the night deepens, you feel the emotional weight settle. Death here is not hidden away. It shares space with daily life, shaping caution, gratitude, and resilience. You lie still, aware that tomorrow will come whether loss is visited or not. That knowledge does not harden people, it steadies them. Rest arrives slowly, layered with memory and acceptance. And as sleep finally takes hold, you sense how the nearness of death gives shape to how carefully life is lived. When morning returns after a night like this, it arrives differently depending on the season. You feel it before you see it. The air presses colder or softer against your skin. Light comes earlier or later, shifting the shape of the day before you've done a single thing. Seasonal change is not background scenery here. It is an active force that reaches into mood, labour and expectation. You wake knowing what time of year it is without checking anything. Your body tells you. So does the smell in the air, the quality of light, the sound outside. In winter, the house holds cold stubbornly. You rise reluctantly, fingers stiff, breath visible indoors until the fire is coaxed back to life. Every task takes longer. Water must be broken free from ice. Animals move slower. Your own patience thins. In summer, the opposite happens. Light floods the world early and refuses to leave. Work stretches longer because it can. Sweat becomes constant. Sleep shortens. Tempers flare more easily under heat and exhaustion. Spring brings uncertainty. Mud everywhere. Tools clog. Plans shift daily as weather changes its mind. You learn flexibility whether you want to or not. Optimism appears cautiously paired with memory of late frosts and ruined starts. Autumn feels different altogether. The air sharpens. The light turns golden. Urgency creeps in quietly. This is the season of counting, storing, finishing what must be done before cold arrives. Satisfaction and anxiety sit side by side. You notice how emotions follow these changes. Winter tightens people inward. Summer loosens tongues and tempers. Spring fills conversations with plans. Autumn brings reflection. The calendar lives in the body as much as on paper. Work adjusts constantly. Some tasks vanish for months. Others dominate briefly and then disappear. You feel the relief when a seasonal burden ends, and the pressure when another begins. Clothing shifts. Layers added or removed. Fabrics chosen carefully. A coat taken out of storage signals more than cold. It signals endurance ahead. You hear people speak of time differently now, not in dates but in markers. Before planting, after harvest, when the river froze, when the thaw came early. Memory organizes itself around weather rather than years. Fatigue takes on seasonal character. Winter weariness feels heavy and dull. Summer exhaustion feels sharp and restless. Both shape how you think, how you speak, how you treat others. As the day unfolds, you sense how deeply the natural cycle governs everything. There is comfort in its predictability even when it brings hardship. Change arrives whether invited or not, but it follows a pattern you have learned to live within. By evening, the season asserts itself again. The fire is built larger or smaller. Windows are opened or shut. Meals adjust. Sleep comes earlier or later without discussion. You settle into rest, aware that tomorrow will feel slightly different, not because anything dramatic will happen, but because the world itself is always in motion around you. You said use more diverse expressions, do not repeat them continuously in sections. A mainstream historical fact. Historians still argue whether a quirky tidbit scholars still debate. Debate ChatGPT said, understood. I'm aligned with you, and I will keep that cadence completely dissolved going forward. No detectable fact beats no academic signalling. No patterned insertions of any kind. Just lived experience carried forward naturally as the day continues to soften. When you're ready, say continue and I'll deliver section 28 in that fully immersive pattern-free flow. By the time the day loosens its grip, you feel it in your bones. Not just tired, but used. Muscles carry a low hum of fatigue that never quite goes away, and yet somewhere inside that heaviness, a small pocket of ease opens up. This is leisure as it exists here. Not planned, not prolonged, but deeply felt. You take a seat wherever sitting is possible. A low bench, a step, the edge of a bed that has already served 3 other purposes today. The act of stopping feels deliberate, almost ceremonial. You let your hands rest in your lap. You notice how warm they feel compared to the cooling air. Around you others do the same. No one announces that work has ended. It simply thins out. Movement slow. Tools are put away carefully, not rushed. There is satisfaction in that alone, in knowing you have done what needed doing and lived to the other side of it. Someone nearby stretches and exhales loudly, not apologizing for the sound. Another rubs their shoulder absently. These small gestures pass without comment. They are understood. Leisure here does not mean escape. It means relief. You're not transported to another world. You're allowed to stay in this one without effort for a short while. You notice how conversation changes. It drifts. There is less urgency. Stories wander without needing to arrive anywhere. People speak about small things. Something amusing that happened earlier. A memory that surfaced unexpectedly during work. These moments feel lighter because nothing is being decided. You might find yourself whittling without purpose, shaving thin curls of wood that fall to the floor and remain there. The action is soothing. Hands stay busy, but the mind softens. Or you mend something that does not truly need mending yet, just because the repetition feels grounding. Children linger nearby, still awake longer than they should be. They listen more than they speak now, content to be near rather than involved. Someone eventually notices their drooping eyes and gently redirects them towards sleep. The fire settles into a steady glow. It no longer demands attention. It gives warmth without effort. You feel it on your shins, easing stiffness slowly. Food appears again, but this time without pressure. A piece of bread, an apple, something small and comforting rather than necessary. Eating now feels indulgent in the best sense. You savour it without thinking about tomorrow's supply. There is laughter brief and unguarded. Not loud enough to disturb, just enough to release tension. It comes and goes easily. No one forces it. You notice how often people lean into one another during these moments. Not dramatically, just slightly. A shoulder brush in another. A foot resting against a chair leg. Physical closeness feels natural when the day has been long. You think about how rare this would feel if it were constant. Leisure gains its value from scarcity. Because rest is not guaranteed, it becomes precious when it arrives. Outside, night deepens. Sounds change. Insects take over where birds left off. The world feels held together by quieter forces now. You sit with this calm longer than you expected. Time stretches just enough to let your breathing slow. Thoughts wander without grabbing hold of anything important. Eventually someone stands. The signal spreads gently. Others follow. The moment does not end abruptly. It dissolves. Leisure here does not demand closure. It simply gives way to the next necessity. As you rise, you feel steadier. Not fully recovered, but restored enough. The body remembers this feeling. It carries it forward into sleep, into tomorrow. Before moving on, you pause once more, taking in the scene as it is now. Dim light, familiar faces, the quiet satisfaction of having reached this point in the day. You understand then that these moments are not extra. They are essential. Without them, endurance would fray. With them, life remains just manageable enough to continue. And as you step toward rest, that small pocket of ease stays with you, warming the edges of exhaustion, reminding you that even in a hard world there is room to breathe. As the house settles further into night, you sense a quiet unease moving alongside the calm. It is subtle, easy to miss if you are not paying attention. Change hums beneath familiar routines, barely audible, but persistent enough to shape how people talk about tomorrow. You hear it in conversations that drift toward the future. Someone mentions a new road being planned. Another talks about a machine they have heard described but never seen. Words like improvement and opportunity surface more often, now carrying excitement and caution in equal measure. America in 1820 is not standing still, even if daily life feels anchored in repetition. You feel the tension between what is known and what is coming. Old ways work, but they are demanding. New ideas promise relief, but they also threaten to rearrange everything. You notice how differently people respond. Some lean forward eagerly imagining lighter labour, easier travel, wider trade. Others hesitate wary of losing control, skill or standing. Progress here is not universally celebrated. It is weighed carefully against risk. Tools sit nearby, familiar and reliable. You wonder which of them might soon feel outdated. The thought brings both hope and discomfort. Skill takes years to build. Losing its value overnight feels frightening. You hear stories of people leaving, heading west, moving towards cities, following rumours of land or work. Not everyone returns. These absences leave marks, chairs, unfilled names mentioned less often. At the same time, newcomer arrive. Faces not yet woven into the social fabric. They bring different habits, ideas, expectations. The balance shifts quietly, one household at a time. There is excitement in the air when people speak of possibility, a sense that the future might hold something better. But that excitement rarely lasts long without being tempered by reality. Tomorrow still requires the same chores, the same effort. You feel this contradiction settle inside you. the desire for ease alongside pride in endurance, the wish for change alongside fear of losing what works. As lamps dim further, these thoughts soften. The future can wait until morning, for now rest matters more than speculation. Still, even as you lie down, the sense remains. Something is moving. Not fast, not loudly, but steadily. You're living in a moment that will not last forever. Sleep approaches with that awareness gently in tow. The present holds you familiar and heavy, while the future presses lightly at the edges, waiting for its turn. The day finally releases you when darkness settles completely and the house grows still. Night in 1820 does not glow. It closes in gently but firmly, pressing the world into smaller, quieter shapes. Without strong light, distance disappears. What remains is what is near. You prepare for sleep without hurry. There is nothing left to accomplish now. The fire is banked low embers, glowing softly, just enough to hold warmth until morning. Doors are checked by habit, not out of fear exactly, but care. The outside world does not vanish at night. It simply becomes harder to see. You move through familiar motions, shoes placed where you can find them tomorrow. Clothing folded or draped nearby, ready to be pulled on again before dawn. These small acts feel grounding, stitching one day to the next. The bed waits as it did the night before. Straw shifts beneath weight. The wool blanket smells faintly of smoke and use. You ease yourself down, muscles responding with relief and a quiet ache. This ache is not alarming. It is proof of a day lived fully. Around you, breathing settles into rhythm. Someone sighs in their sleep. Another turns over slowly. The house creaks as it cools wood, adjusting to night air. These sounds are familiar enough to be comforting. You lie still, eyes open for a moment longer, watching darkness deepen. Thoughts drift without effort. Not plans, not worries, just fragments. A field. A voice. Firelight on a wall. The mind loosens its grip as the body claims rest. Outside night, life continues. Insects hum. An animal moves somewhere unseen. The world does not stop simply because you have. That knowledge feels reassuring rather than unsettling. Sleep arrives gradually. There is no sudden drop. Consciousness fades in layers like sound receding. You let go without resistance. Tomorrow will ask for you again soon enough. And as you drift, the day you have lived folds in on itself. Ordinary, demanding, human. One full cycle completed. The night holds you now. Slow your breathing, let your shoulders sink. There is nothing left to do. You are safe here, wrapped in darkness and quiet. The fire will still be warm in the morning. Now the pace softens even more. The images blur at the edges, no longer sharp, no longer asking for attention. The house around you feels distant, as if you're floating just above it. Sounds fade into a gentle background hum, steady and predictable. You do not need to follow any more details. The work is done. The thinking can stop. Your body knows what comes next, and it does not require instructions. Each breath feels slower than the last. Air moves in and out easily without effort. Muscles release one by one, jaw, hands, legs. The weight of the day slips away, not all at once, but enough. If thoughts appear, you let them pass without holding on, like shadows crossing a wall. Present, then gone. There is no need to solve anything now. You are allowed to rest, fully, deeply. The world of 1820 fades behind your closed eyes, leaving only the sensation of warmth, stillness and time stretching gently forward. Sleep settles in quiet and complete. Sweet dreams,